Well, welcome along on this Friday evening to the State of Scottish Football. It is the weekend preview show. I am your host, Colin Watt, and I'm delighted to be rejoined eventually by my co-pilot. He's going to take us through this incredible weekend of cinch that we've got coming up. Sean, welcome back on a Friday.
Thanks very much. It's been far too long, Colin, since I've been sat with you on a Friday. So I'm very excited to be here. To be honest, I wish I'd been with you last week because I made the long trip up to Arbroath to watch Kilmarnock and it wasn't really worth my time at all. I think Kelly had one shot on target in the entire game and we're lucky to escape Gayfield with a point. But Gayfield's one of the grounds I've been meaning to tick off for a while. So I was actually quite happy to do that and to get to a Kelly game again. It's been a while, considering I'm usually busy on a Saturday with Boyerick Rose. So, I'm very glad to be back on this Friday evening with yourself.
And we here at the State of Scottish Football are brought to you by Eteves Watches. You can see the logo up there in the top right-hand corner. Check them out. We do have some fantastic football to look forward to. Lots of teams who could end up on the top of the podium by the end of the weekend. But first of all, we are going to start with the game that Sky is covering this weekend, and that is the Aberdeen versus Celtic clash at Pittodrie. It is a 12 o'clock kickoff on Sunday lunchtime. If you are going to stick this one on the coupon, we'll run you through the odds. As always, please bet responsibly. Aberdeen at home are 11-2. 3-1 gets you the draw, and 5-9 is a Celtic victory. First of all, 11-2 for an Aberdeen draw. An Aberdeen win, Sean. That tells you the kind of form that Aberdeen's been on over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. It's been pretty disastrous for Stephen Glass and Aberdeen in the last few weeks. We had so much hope. They were playing good football. It was a step away from the pretty murder sort of product we were seeing under Derek McInnes in the latter stages of his tenure at Pittodrie, and you had real hope for Stephen Glass, but there was sort of doubts last season when Glass took over towards the end, and you thought, how would they get started this summer? And it seemed to be going pretty well, but of course the wheels have come off a little bit. That's not to say Stephen Glass is definitely sort of dead in his Aberdeen career, but I think there's still plenty of time to revive it. But it's certainly been a troubling time, and the fixtures aren't getting any easier for the Dons in the next few weeks, so they're going to have to step it up.
Interesting point coming in here from Eugene McGeever. Welcome along to everyone who is watching us. We're live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter. We're everywhere you can get a video, and probably other places we've not seen yet. Eugene McGeever comes in to say, thoughts on VAR coming into the Scottish Premier League this season. Now, this is actually quite interesting. I did a poll on my own Twitter, which just finished before we started, and it showed that 68% of people were open to the idea of VAR coming into Scottish football this season. Now, myself and Sean are going to let VAR review that, and we'll come back to you with our points halfway through this programme. But until then, I want to know what you guys think. So everyone that's watching along this evening, let us know your thoughts on VAR. We'll do a sort of virtual poll in the live chat at the moment. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll look at them halfway through the show. But getting back to the game, now we mentioned the kind of form that Stephen Glass is in. Here's one for you. Aberdeen haven't beaten Celtic at Pittodrie since February 2016. That's 5 years since Aberdeen last got a win at home to Celtic. The Celtic manager at that point was Ronnie Dyler. That's how far it has been since that day. Celtic's you only have to go back to February 2020 for Celtic's last victory at Pittodrie, a 2-1 win. But the question I'd put out there, Sean, is who really needs the points more on Sunday? Is it the struggling Aberdeen side under Stephen Glass, or is it this project side under Ange Postecoglou, who fans are starting to doubt whether he is the man for the job?
I see them in kind of similar categories. I would also categorise Stephen Glass as a project manager because I don't think after the stability and everything that Derek McInnes brought to Aberdeen, after they were punching well below their weight and he got them to be a real force in Scottish football again, obviously not at the same level as previously, but in sort of comparative terms from what you'd expect from Aberdeen. So I think that Stephen Glass coming in, it was going to take a while to bed in and for the players to get used to that transition. Of course, he's brought in some of his own players as well, his new backroom staff, and that's going to take some time. So I think that I view them quite similarly. I'd like to see both of them get time because there's promising aspects to both of their tenures so far. And just because results haven't been ideal in the last few weeks, I don't think it should be either side should be too quick to boot the other one out the door. And to answer your question, I think that Celtic can need the points more just because of the sort of perspective of it, the perceptions of these two sides. If Aberdeen lose to Celtic, like you said, it's been a long time since Aberdeen defeated Celtic at Pittodrie. I think you'd kind of write that one off as being we got beat by Celtic, who, despite their poor form recently, are still have a far superior squad to ours. I think that would be the Aberdeen outlook on it. Whereas for Celtic and Ange Postecoglou, I think it would be another massive blow after the heavy defeat, which I'm sure we'll talk about, to Bayer Leverkusen at Parkhead just last night. That to lose to Aberdeen would be a really big sticking point, and the fans sort of the fans, I guess, doubts about Ange Postecoglou that you mentioned there would just ramp up even more. So I would say that it's the visitors who need the points more in this one, not in terms of their position league table necessarily, but more because of the perception that a defeat would give off for Celtic.
You mentioned that result last night, Celtic losing 4-0 to Bayer Leverkusen at home. What were your thoughts on the Celtic performance last night, and where did you see it going wrong?
It started so promising, didn't it? It started like it was going to be an absolute belter, and it was still a very enjoyable game, but I imagine less so for folk like yourself who were watching it from the terraces in green and white, because despite Celtic's promising start and despite the reintroduction of some key players, Callum McGregor, Kyogo Furuhashi, who looked lively in those opening minutes as well, it was just kind of the same old for Celtic. It was defensive mistakes, and I like when a manager has a philosophy. I think for a team like Celtic, it's great to have that very clear identity. You know what you're getting, and those fans want to be entertained. I'm sure you would echo that sentiment. But is he too married to it? Is there a sense of inflexibility? The one that really sticks out to me is the second goal, just because does Tony Ralston have the technical ability to play as an inverted right back, an inverted full back? Because when he picks up that ball in that central area, it just seems completely uncomfortable the way he turns into. I know he's pressed by a very, very good side. They're second in the Bundesliga at the moment. If it was just a defeat, sort of say 2-0 or something like that, I don't think you'd be reading too much into it because they are such a good side. But the manner of it, the mistakes, of course, that David Turnbull slip where he just gets caught in two minds. And for that first one, I don't think it's a penalty. I don't know how VAR didn't overturn that. Maybe we can talk about that later on as well. And of course, the late one as well, it's a smash and finish. But I just thought that despite promising aspects in terms of Celtic's forward play, it was the same old at the back. And it's something that's been undoing Celtic for far too long now. And I think there's still talk about how they need to get another centre-back and another left-back in. And I just think you've had the summer. These problems were there last season. They had to be addressed. It doesn't really feel like they have. Of course, it was two new signings at the heart of defence. And I don't think Carl Starfelt had a particularly good game at all. I don't think he's really hit the ground running. It's still early days for Cameron Carter-Vickers. So it's weird to see after a 4-0 defeat there was promising aspects, but also it's very concerning how the same old seems to be happening, albeit against a very good side, as I said.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to speak about Anthony Ralston because I get into trouble anytime I speak about him, so I'll leave it at that. But no, you've made some great points there. There is some players that clearly don't suit playing that style of football. Now, you did mention the idea of having a plan B, and last night was the first time we actually saw Ange change to a plan B. Okay, the game was already done. It was already 3-0 to Leverkusen at the time, but he brought on both Albion Ajeti and the forgotten man, Georgios Giakoumakis, who came on to a bit of a rapturous applause because people were actually just excited at the fact that we had actually signed him and he wasn't just...
He does exist.
He wasn't just a Greek myth. So that shows that there is the option to go to the 4-4-2, which they did last night, where Beaton and I can't even remember who else was left on the park.
James McCarthy at that point?
It was McCarthy. It was Beaton and McCarthy played in the holding roles, and we saw more of Jota and Abada as sort of proper wingers as such. Looking at it though, Aberdeen, the players just aren't performing for Stephen Glass this season. Guys that look to have stepped up over the last couple of years like Lewis Ferguson, linked with big moves all over the UK, hasn't put in a shift this year. Captain
No.
Scott Brown, he's shown the form that had him dropped out of the Celtic side. And Joe Lewis, who is always good to put a good couple of saves in, he's not performing up to those levels. When you've got your key sort of talisman doing that for you, and your star men is really your fullbacks, who are both 19 and 20 years old, it kind of sums up how Aberdeen's season's going. Now, there's plenty of Aberdeen pundits on this show. We've got Glenn, we've got Grant, and they both said to me they would be surprised if Aberdeen get anything out of the game. But the best thing they think they can do is actually attack Celtic. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you see that it might leave them vulnerable, but I think Aberdeen's defence have struggled so much this season when we expected so much more. I mean, I think it's a decent chance it's going to be David Bates and Ross McCrory tomorrow, because Declan Gallagher's been
David
dropped.
Bates, I don't know did you see the highlights of the St Mirin game?
I watched a fair chunk of the St Mirin game, and I was, yeah. David Bates was always a gamble for me. There was always, when it was signed, there seemed to be a lot of hype around it, but it'd been a long time since he'd been in Scotland, and David Bates was signed off being a promising player rather than being an established player at the time. And I'll admit to not knowing massively how well he did at Hamburg. I've kept up and read what I could, and it seemed to be that he sort of dipped in and out of the squad. He was never really a firm sort of choice there. So when coming to Aberdeen, it was still, this is just a promising player who we don't actually know if is the end product. And I know that he's still settling in, but it doesn't seem like he's fulfilled that potential yet. And I don't think Ross McCrory's been able to fulfill his potential because he keeps being forced to play at centre-back, which isn't his position. And Aberdeen have lots of very good options in that central midfield area. You mentioned Scott Brown and Lewis Ferguson underperforming, but even without that, there's Funzo Ojo, there's Dean Campbell, Terry Jenks, who's suspended for this game. There's lots of options in that midfield. Matty Longstaff as well came on loan from Newcastle, another really promising signing for them. So he's been shoved out, but he's too good a player not to play. So you chuck him back one, but it's very, very detrimental to Aberdeen's defence. But I don't think their attacking play has been particularly stunning either. I mean, that St Mirin game, that the first goal, Scott Brown's goal, he knows absolutely nothing about it. And then I don't know where the marking is for Christian Ramirez, albeit it was a fantastic header.
Great header, absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that goal. So it's one of those where I'm not really sure where Aberdeen's strengths are at this moment in time, but I know where Celtic's weaknesses are, and that's certainly at the back. So if you're going to approach this game in any way, I think you've got to take it to them and have big Christian Ramirez, who's been one of the few sort of plus points at times this season, not even consistently. I think he can give Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers a tough one. So I'd say go for it in this one and try and get that Pittodrie crowd up, because if you're sitting back and you're soaking up this pressure and it's not going too well, that crowd's not going to be too happy when they already have doubts about the team this season and the manager.
So just a couple of squad updates ahead of the game on Sunday. Andy Considine obviously still missing, and Teddy Jenks, who has one of the worst names in football, is suspended after his red card that he picked up against St Mirren. Celtic welcome back Kyogo Furuhashi, Callum McGregor, Giorgio Xhakamatis and James McCarthy into the squad. We're going to bring up some of the comments here, but just whilst I do that, it's worth noting that Aberdeen this season have picked up 14 yellow cards. And both teams average around 70% possession. So it'll be interesting to see how both teams line up against this. If they go end-to-end sort of basketball style, then I think it could be a very interesting game to watch. Jerry H coming in to say the weakness in Celtic is the midfield and the fullbacks. Turnbull and Roderick can't play in the same team, especially more against teams like Bayer Leverkusen. I think he definitely saw that last night. I'm trying to see if we've got an Aberdeen perspective in here. I don't think we have.
Our colleagues are in the comments tonight.
I don't think we have, but this one really surprised me. Nuno Espirito Santo, which is that's the Spurs manager, isn't it?
Surprised he's watching tonight. He should be sorting that team out, surely.
I know you need to get to work. That's a terrible defeat, but up the Greenock Shamrock, yeah, anything for that. I'll take that. Time to make the predictions as we are almost 15 minutes in. I'm going to start it off, and I've got absolutely no reason behind this, but it's just been in my head for the last 24 hours. 3-0 Celtic.
3-0 Celtic. Wow. There was that cracker at Pittodrie last season when there was a 3-0 between the two sides. I really enjoyed that game. But yeah, I think Celtic have to get back on track. But if Aberdeen lose, that's, I think, their 4th consecutive Premiership loss, which would be pretty dire for
nine without a win. It would be unbelievable.
9 without, is that all competitions, and then 4 in the league. So you'd be very concerned about the Dons if that was to happen. But I'm going to go with Celtic 2, but I don't fancy them to keep a clean sheet. Have you seen the state of them at the moment? So I'm going to say 2-1, quite narrow.
Do you know, it's more likely to be that, but just for some reason I have it in my head that it's going to be 3-0. If it comes in, then whatever, we'll see what happens. We have to talk about the scenes last night over in Prague. And we'll do that as we preview the game at Ibrox this weekend. It is Rangers versus Hibs. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff on Sunday afternoon. If you are sticking this one on the coupon, here is your odds. Again, bet responsibly. Rangers are 4-11. The draw is 4-1. And Hibs are 13-2. Both teams are unbeaten in their last 5 games. But, Sean, we need to talk about what happened last night. Now, Sparta Prague went into that game where they should have had the stadium closed, but due to UEFA's fair play laws, they were allowed to invite kids and coaches or adults alongside them to watch over them. But it just looked as if that it was the same kind of issue that Kamara faced, not against Sparta, but against Slavia, and they certainly singled them out from the word go.
They did, and it was genuinely quite scary and really impactful that school children could have this view or do these things at such a young age. It was really quite worrying, and I think that there's so many concerns around it. I think that big things has to happen in sort of sanctions towards Czech football teams in Europe, because there's a clear problem. I mean, they're rivals. They hate each other. But they can put that aside to racially abuse a player. And it'll be framed as Glenn Kamara. I wonder how Glenn Kamara was framed post the Cadella incident in the Czech Republic. Was he the enemy in all this? That's what it seemed. That's the only thing I can imagine. Cadella missed the European Championships because rightfully missed the European Championships after that incident with Glenn Kamara. And I just wonder how the news and the media framed it over there, that meant that school children would be booing Glenn Kamara, because I'd say that it was specifically Glenn Kamara and there was other black players on the pitch for Rangers. So what happened in that scenario that made that happen? But I still think the treatment in general was absolutely shocking. And I mean, I've been to Prague. I love the city there, and these sort of things didn't really cross your mind. But if I was to ever end up back there, I think I'd feel genuinely uncomfortable being just around people who so blatantly and obviously and unapologetically have these views. So I really want to see something happen to not just Sparta Prague, but I think Czech teams in general, because it's a serious problem in that country that we're seeing now. It's not just football. If there's a bunch of bairns booing a player for being black, it is absolutely terrifying.
Do you know what? And I'd like to give the kids the benefit of the doubt to say that it wasn't a kind of racist thing, right? I'd like to think it was just what you said earlier, that it was that he is the sort of enemy because of what has happened. You mentioned the Cadella thing.
But it's still framed in that, it's still in a racist context, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that you'd like to try and give them the benefit of the doubt, but as Cole P comes in here to say there were kids in the Slavia end holding up banners supporting Cadella, so it's very, very difficult to see it in any other light. You're hoping that there's not a generation of kids that are being brought up like that. But the evidence just stacks up against them. Now, Sparta have come out this afternoon with a statement which, if you want to have a good laugh, then go and read it. Basically, they turned the kind of whole thing upside down and blamed Rangers for absolutely everything that happened last night. I just don't get it. As you say, I think there is a problem in that country. I remember going on a stag do about a year, no, longer than that now because of COVID, so maybe 2-3 years ago. We went to a Dukla Prague versus Slavia Prague game at Dukla Stadium. Fantastic wee stadium. And I wore a Celtic top to the game because there's a connection between Dukla and Celtic. And as soon as I was spotted by the Slavia Ultras, I was asked to leave the stadium. The security said it's not safe for you to be here. It'd be better if you left the stadium. Then we went over to the other side of the stand and watched the game, and it was fine. The Dukla Prague fans were brilliant, but I don't know what it is. There is something about the Czech teams and the Scottish teams that just doesn't tie together. So I really don't know. But I mean, what we've got to see is you've got to see UEFA take a stand against this and actually do something about it. But Rangers themselves, I think, have to do something too. And the first thing that their priority has to be, in my opinion, is to protect Glenn Kamara. That's 4 games now that he's missed because of racist incidents. Rangers have to help him out here in some way or form.
What does that mean? How not play him?
Whether it's not play them, whether it's but he's missing 4 games now, Sean. That's 4 games for things that he can't actually control. Okay, maybe he shouldn't have retaliated against Cadella in the tunnel, but who's going to tell anybody that's been in that situation not to retaliate?
Yeah, of course.
And then last night, I think the fans on his back, whether it played into his mind or not, it's cost him a red card last night.
Well, yeah, it wasn't a second yellow, was it? There was nothing in that for.
I don't think there was, but when you've got the fans that can have an influence on the referee, I do think you've got to be a bit smarter about things like that.
Who's the winner though? If Rangers stop playing Glenn Kamara because he might get racially abused, who wins in that situation?
I don't know.
I don't think that. I understand, but and what the point you're getting at, that it must be not in just Glenn Kamara's career, but in terms personally, it must be like extremely harrowing to go through that consistently now. But I'd say that's a personal decision for Glenn Kamara, and if he feels as though, I don't think he should be stopped from doing his job because these people are prejudiced and these people discriminate against him. I think that Glenn Kamara I think it's brave of Glenn Kamara to go back out there in that country after the abuse,
absolutely,
and everything that happened,
absolutely, yeah,
and to go and do his job and stand with his head held high. And disgusting that probably the biggest cheer of the night was when he got sent off. So for me, I know that this is not what you're saying, but the 100% more, all of the focus for me needs to be on how to fix Sparta Prague, Czech football, and the issue they have, and less so on what Rangers can do. Because I think throughout, if you go back to the start after the Cadella incident, the Rangers have stood by their player with a great degree of sort of solidarity and respect for him. So I think that all of our focus in terms of football discourse should be how can we punish the Czech Republic, how can we solve that problem first before we're too concerned about what Rangers are doing.
I just think if you're Steven Gerrard last night and you know he's on a yellow card, I think that the best thing to do, knowing the kind of situation that's going on, is just to maybe take him off. And I know he probably doesn't want to take him off because of the reasons that you've said, and it's absolutely justified. But I mean, he's now going to miss who's the next game they've got? Is it Brøndby? Brøndby at home, all because of what happened to him. And there's just no balance in that there. I don't see the fairness. Where is UEFA's fair play?
Yeah, and it's UEFA who we need to be looking at now and what they do going forward. Because Glenn Kamara, no black player, Glenn Kamara included, should face that sort of treatment in any stadium. The fact it's by kids is even more disgusting. So I don't hold my breath for what UEFA might do next, though, because I think that we've seen time and time again. I mean, it was 10 games for Cadella when it was so blatant, so obvious, and it's just they're failing time and time again. They're all slogans, UEFA, and until we see actual change, we won't have any trust in them. So I don't hold my breath, but for me, there needs to be serious ramifications for, as I said, not just Sparta Prague, but the entirety of Czech football.
It'll be interesting to see what UEFA does do after this. I'm sure we'll find out in the coming days. But let's look ahead to the game on Sunday. Let's talk about Hibs. First of all, I just want to give a special mention to the Hibs women's team. Over 5,500 at Easter Road on Wednesday night, was it? Wednesday night?
Yeah, it was Wednesday night.
For their derby game against Hearts, which is the biggest turnout in Scottish women's club football history. So that's fantastic for them. But the men's team, they're unbeaten at the start of the season. And ever since Martin Boyle's been given this new deal, Sean, he's like a player reborn. Is that 10 goals already for the season?
I know. He's been fantastic. And he's one of those who's always been a danger. Whenever I've watched Martin Boyle play against Kilmarnock, I've always thought, every time he gets the ball, you just get a little bit more nervous. But this season, and the season's gone by, really, he's turned that raw pace into being a genuine goal threat with his assists and his goals. And, of course, a few of them have been from the spot. And Hibs have been a bit lucky with that, I think, at certain points throughout this season and perhaps last as well. But he's just a cracking player, and for me, the best player outside the Old Firm, because he's such a threat at all times. And he does, even when he plays wing back as well in a back three, he's done that less so, but when it's a back five and he's there, he does his fair share of defensive duties as well. I just think his attitude's absolutely fantastic. He's a constant threat, as I said, and it's been a pretty good time considering his wife Rachel also scored in the derby on Wednesday, so it's a good time to be a Boyle.
Do you know, it's interesting. I was going to mention that later on when we get to Dundee, but that's two couples that have scored in both the men's and the women's games. You've got Ian Harkes and Sarah Harkes. Sarah Harkes scoring for Celtic, Ian Harkes scoring for Dundee at the weekend.
I don't think I knew that about Ian Harkes.
So his wife is the former Sarah Teagarden, the Celtic women's midfielder. Right. And she scored against Hibs at the weekend, whilst Ian Harkes scored for Dundee United against Celtic. So I'm sure there was some interesting debate in the Harkes household. Let's get to the predictions for this one. This is a chance for Hibs and Rangers to both go top or cement their place at the top of the table. Hibs haven't beat Rangers since February 2018. Again, this game at Ibrox, I think it'll be a very, very close one. But I still fancy Rangers to pick up the 3 points. I'm going for a 2-1 victory.
I might have joined you on that. Do you know what? I'm going to be bold. I'm loving supporting the Edinburgh teams this season. I think that seeing them right up there at the top of the table, a good bit above Celtic, is quite enjoying to see. I hope they get above Rangers as well. So I'm not going to be brave enough to say a Hibs win, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw in this one at Ibrox.
A 1-1 draw from Sean. Some team news ahead of the game. It looks as if Goldson and Bakuna will return for Rangers, whereas Hibs could be without Josh Doig. That could be a big loss for them. I guess Lewis Stevenson would come in then if that was the case.
Yeah, you'd think so. And they still swap about a fair bit, Josh Doig and Lewis Stevenson. I think it's undeniable that Doig's the number one now, but there's been times, certainly at the start of the season, when Doig's future was a little bit more up in the air, that Lewis Stevenson was trusted, and of course he's got loads of experience, but that might give some confidence to, you'd imagine, to be Kamar Roof on that right hand side, that he could get in behind and cause some problems if the pace of Doig isn't there as much with Stevenson.
Staying in the capital, we have a 3:00 kickoff on Saturday. It is Hearts versus Motherwell. It is third versus fourth, and either of these teams with a victory could find themselves at the top of the table come 5:00 on Saturday afternoon. Hearts are the favourites going into the game. They're 4-7 with the bookies. 14-5 gets you the draw, and 5-1 for Motherwell. That's a very, very big price. Now, looking ahead to this game, Sean, as I said, it's a chance for either to go top. Obviously, Hearts had a good win at the weekend, and it looks as though the fans have a new fan favourite, an Australian, Cameron Devlin. He just seemed to cover every single blade of grass at the weekend, and I think that's the thing that Hearts have been missing, is that dynamic sort of box-to-box midfielder.
Yeah, I mean, they're blessed at the moment, aren't they? Cameron Devlin and Benny Beningame. They seem to have two players that have just fallen in love with. I saw some debate about which one of them they think is better. I mean, Cammy Devlin's played one game, so I think Hearts fans are getting a wee bit ahead of themselves there. But it's been a while since they were able to get this excited, and it makes sense given the performance at the weekend was, from what I've heard from a lot of Hearts fans, it's pretty undeniably the best performance in Robbie Nielsen's second tenure at Tynecastle, and perhaps Hearts' best performance in a long, long time. Played Livingston off the park and had lots of intensity and energy, and of course there's a great goal by Michael Smith to get stuff started in that one. But Cammy Devlin had a lot of hype. I know the articles around them when he came over. It's hard to know how players will adjust making such a big journey from Australia, how will they handle the step up in quality football, how will they adapt to their new way of life. But people who knew more about Cameron Devlin seem to think that he'd be a great fit for Hearts. He had lots of attributes that would fit in nicely to this team, and alongside Biringame, who just never seems to lose the ball, great at winning the ball back, lacks a little bit of pace, but I think that his all-round game is fantastic. You can see why he made a decent amount of appearances for Everton a few years ago, and it's why my pals are utterly convinced that they won't have him by the start of next season. They're even lucky to be holding on to him at January. It was a 3-year deal they got him on, but they do not expect him to be around for a long time. So it's so exciting to have a proper midfield duo in Hearts. A central midfield's been a position they've struggled for a long time. Peter Harron was struggling with injuries for ages. Andy Halliday was brought in and then shuffled out, and it's just been a sort of a long time since Hearts had real faith in their central midfield. But I think Devlin and Biringame is a duo that would strike fear in any team at the moment. Of course, it's still early days for Devlin, and we'll see how they progress. But I'm excited to keep an eye on this Hearts side because there's so much going for them at the moment.
And it's just fun to say his name as well. It's just one of those fun names to say.
Biringame.
Biringame. I mean, it's one that some people. Yeah, it's one that I'm listening. I'm listening to you trying to get it so that I can say it myself. Yeah. Let's look at Motherwell though. Graham Alexander has had some turnaround. They are sitting pretty much joint top of the form table at the minute with 4 wins in 5 games, 5 unbeaten. Tony Watt has been in sensational form for Motherwell. And when you look at his career overall, it's always been a season here, a season there, maybe 2 seasons here at most. But do you think, Sean, perhaps that at Fir Park, Tony Watt is now home?
I really hope so, because he's a great character, Tony Watt. All the stuff he puts out on social media. He's a decent follow on TikTok if you don't follow him already, Colin.
Yeah.
He's got some good stuff going on there. And he just seems like a nice guy. And there was talk, I mean, it's cliched at this point, but Motherwell's social media output is so good. But they kind of did a wee feature on that Tony Watt wants to be more than just that goal against Barcelona. He wanted to have more to his career than that. And of course, it's an amazing moment. Of course, he's grateful for it. But you don't want... It was so long ago. He was so young. So much has happened since then. And he seemed to settle in well at Motherwell, but it was more as a workhorse. He would do the work for other people, while players like Devante Cole last season scored the majority of the goals, and Watt would be supplying them or sort of doing that busy work around another striker. But I mean, he's banging the goals in. He's been absolutely brilliant so far, and it's great to see because when a player has such a sort of topsy-turvy time, he moved abroad on a few occasions, never really seemed to work out, but to see him at home, to see him comfortable, to see him scoring goals, I think is really great to see. I'm not going to go far as Struan Garvey. I don't know if he said it on the State of Scottish Football, but I heard him say on an Energy podcast that he should have been in the Scotland squad this week. I thought that was a little bit premature. From me, but Struan loves to get ahead of himself. He's a reactionary guy.
That's future Scotland manager Struan Garvey we're talking about here.
I don't know about that. I love him, but I don't know about that. I'm not going to get ahead of myself too much and say that he should be leading the line for Steve Clarke's side, but he's doing a great job for Graham Alexander. And I've got Motherwell really wrong this season. I thought that they were going to be struggling, and that I guess there's still time, but they've proved me wrong so far. And I said Kevin Van Veen was going to be a star, but it was closer to home. Tony Watt's doing the business now.
It's interesting you said that you thought they were going to struggle. I did as well. I thought looking at that team, they didn't look a lot stronger than the team that finished in the bottom 6 last year. But now looking at it, they do look like a kind of comfortable top 6 side. Where do you think their goals are for this season? Is it just the top 6, or could you see them pushing for Europe?
I think their goal will be top 6, and then you reassess as the season goes on. Because I mean, they were in trouble for a while last season. Of course, Dean Robinson was dismissed, and Graham Alexander actually has very good numbers if you look at it. Since he got the job, there's not been. Of course, it's a little bit skewed because Hearts won the Championship, so that's harder to judge. But they've been one of the best performing teams outside the Old Firm since Graham Alexander got the job in Lanarkshire. So I think that there's a lot of confidence around that team at the moment. They seem to be building something really, really good. And I think if I was to pick out a game of the weekend, it'd be this one. If I could get myself along to one, I'd probably be choosing this one because I think it'll be a cracker, great atmosphere at Tynecastle always. Motherwell always bring a decent travelling support there. So and two sides who are high on confidence, as you said. So I think this should be a belter.
Yeah, and as I said, this is a chance for either side to go top of the table with the 3 points. And with that in mind, going to predictions, I'm going to say that this one's going to finish 1 each.
I'm sticking my heart. I really fancy them at the moment. It must be my pals getting in my head and hyping all those players up, so I can blame them when it goes catastrophically wrong. But I'm going to say it'll be 2-0 to the JTs.
2-0 to the Jam Tarts. Let us know what you think the score will be. And hold on, we're just getting something in here. We're going to VAR, Sean. We are going to VAR. Now, we mentioned at the start of the show that there will be a summit on, in fact, it's a week today, on the 8th of October, held by, who's the English referee that's came over? He's now the head of the American referees.
Yeah, Howard Webb.
Howard Webb, that's him. 2010 World Cup referee, Howard Webb. And it will be a consultation on whether VAR will be introduced into Scottish football this season. Not next season, this season. And it will be in the top flight and also within the Scottish Cups. Now, we did a poll on Twitter and just short of 70% were in favour of the introduction of VAR. We did ask you for your comments later on, so I'm going to scroll up and find them while Sean tells us his thoughts on the introduction of VAR to Scottish football.
I thought I was going to be rather controversial with my opinion, but it seems that the masses have spoken and I'm lumped in there with them because for me, it is just the way football's going. And Scottish football could shy away from it for as long as it wanted to, if that was the choice that was taken, and say we're not going to change with the times and we're going to stay away. But technology in football is coming. We see it on bigger stages and we see it kind of growing throughout Europe and other leagues at the same stature as Scotland. So for me, it's inevitable. And the quicker that referees get used to this technology that is implemented, that fans get used to it as well. When I say fans getting used to it, I don't mean resigned to it. I don't mean that you've got to not celebrate goals and then because you're waiting for the thing. Because to be fair, Scottish football is so chaotic and so volatile. That's why we love it so much. And in a kind of cynical way, I think VAR just adds to that. Like, imagine a late Old Firm goal that's chopped off by VAR. Like, the sea that would pour out either of those grounds would just be absolutely glorious for a fan like me, who doesn't mind what happens.
You are not winning any fans today, Sean, I'm telling you.
I'm speaking for the drama of it, the stuff like that. I mean, people think that VAR takes away from football, and there's plenty of times where it has. But, like, I don't know if that Champions League quarter-final a few years ago between Man City and Spurs, where City scored a late goal that takes them through to the semi-finals, and then it gets chopped off. Like, I love stuff like that. I'm a horrible person, but I've really enjoyed it. So I think that stuff like that happening in Scottish football, the cheers of a goal getting chopped off could be just as loud as a goal getting awarded in many cases throughout Scotland. So obviously there's issues. I feel like we need to hit some sort of middle ground because last season, if I'm taking the Premier League as an example, of course it's the closest to home, it was too controlling. There was too many interruptions in games. The stupid offsides were a step too far. And then this season, it seems as though nothing will get overturned. If you make a decision, it's probably going to stay that way. And I think a great example is Cameron Carter-Vickers, the penalty awarded against him last night, because I have no idea how that was a penalty. And I've seen some Celtic fans say that they thought that was a penalty. But to me, I don't know how it's hit his back and then touched his arm. I don't know what else he can do in that situation. And I thought that was mental that wasn't overturned, in my opinion. So somewhere in a middle ground of that, where referees can have their mistakes corrected, and I don't know how some of the referees in Scotland will feel about that, considering how highly they value some of their own performances at times. But I think it was always going to happen. It's inevitable. I feel a little bit uneasy about being awarded, sort of implemented this season, because we've had a decent run of games. I don't think it's fair. I think for me, the framework can be put in just now. You can try it in cup games, because that's a little bit of a different scenario. They're one-off anyway. But for me, it's if it's starting a league campaign, it's got to start at the start of the season. So in terms of league action, I'd wait until the start of the 2022-23 season. That's another nice one. I know.
That sounds so far away, doesn't it? But it's
basically
not.
all dead, aren't we? But you more so than me. But aye.
Whoa.
Sorry, mate.
You know what? You're getting muted for that. You are getting muted. I'm going to bring up some of the points whilst Sean sits there in timeout.
I've got the buttons too. I can unmute myself.
Lippy33 says, I'm used to it all now. It's in all UEFA and FIFA competitions. I've got to say, I did know, well, it was in place last night. So I was at the Celtic Leverkusen game last night. And by the way, anyone who else has mentioned about VAR, your comments, there's been so much live chat going on. We've missed them, so bring them back up and I'll bring them on screen. The first incident was an offside goal after 2 minutes. And I didn't even know that it was going to VAR. I just saw the flag go up from the assistant referee and I thought, that's it. There was nothing on the big screens to say that the VAR was checking. And that was it. So I didn't realise the first one had taken place. The second one was for the second goal, which from where I was sitting, which was sort of to the left of the goal, I thought he was offside. I've not seen the replay back yet, but I was convinced he was offside.
He wasn't. But I understand.
Well, obviously he wasn't, because VAR checked it, right?
Aye, but I understand why you thought
that. So when I'm looking at it, I'm saying there has to be more said to the fans to say, look, this has been checked, because it just felt as if we were standing there for 30 seconds. It was pretty quick, but there has to be a bit of communication to the fans that that's going to happen. And there's certain grounds that you go to, and I'm thinking just off the top of my head, I know Rugby Park doesn't have big screens. St Mirin doesn't have big screens. Motherwell doesn't have big screens. So if you've got that sort of situation, there's got to be a way to let the crowd know that this is the reason that the game's been stopped, and for what reason. Especially if you've scored a goal and someone's they're away checking it. They've got to let the fans know why. Otherwise, they're never going to buy into it. But for me, in my opinion, I don't think Scottish football's ready for it. And I think the money would be better spent on actually improving the quality of the referees. Because at the end of the day, the technology will be there to help them. But if the referees aren't up to the standard, then for me, that's just a complete waste of money. I've watched the Scottish referees this season, and you mentioned it about Hibs earlier on, and the penalties that they've got this year. Those decisions were shocking. And you've got to try and hope that because there's some other referees sitting in a van 30, 40 miles away watching the game on the TV as well, that he's going to be able to overwrite that. And I just don't know. I don't know if it would happen.
You want it to be a tool to help rather than a sort of crutch that underperforming referees can fall back on. I completely agree with that. I think that's a very fair point. When people slate the standard Scottish referees, my honest answer is I don't know. I don't know if every other football fan in every other country feels that way. And I know that in the top 5 leagues, your standard refereeing is better, that they're on a higher stage. But I don't know. Do people in sort of Belgium feel the same about their referees? It's a similar sort of level. I generally have no idea. So I'd be interested to know the sort of public perception of referees and whether Scotland's are really that bad. I'm not too sure on it comparatively. I'm not saying every penalty that Aberdeen have ever been awarded was not a penalty, but I think there's been some shockers in last week.
I think Struan mentioned that in our chat as well, that there's been some that Hibs really should have got as well. So, and I know our resident High B, Paul Cockwell, who's in the comments, told me that last week as well. So It just shows you. I honestly don't think the standard of refereeing in Scotland is good enough, and I think if it's a case of having to bring them in full time, then do that first, and then once you do that, then you can look at VAR, because I don't think it's going to help matters. It's just going to give referees an excuse not to improve themselves and not to get to the standard that they need to be at. But that's my opinion, and just going by the comments and going by the poll that we carried out, I'm in the minority, so I'll be interested to see what the outcome of this meeting is in a week's time. So
just to give sorry, can I jump in? This isn't a wide view, but when I spoke to Dylan McGowan, Kilmarnock centre back, a few weeks ago for Energy Sport, I spoke to him about VAR because Australia was the first domestic league to implement VAR. That's where he was playing his football at the time, and I spoke to him about what he thought about VAR and Scottish football, and he found the prospect quite funny, really, just because of the way that how passionate Scottish fans are. He says he loves that playing again in front of. He says he'll always take criticism from Scottish fans because they're the most knowledgeable fan base he's ever played in front of. But we live and breathe our football, and they appreciate that. But because of that passion and that knowledge and all that sort of stuff, he just imagines that he can't really imagine a sort of packed stadium just patiently waiting for the VAR review and then taking whatever comes. It's going to be pretty crazy. I think that the pressure on referees is going to get ramped up even more, and that's something else that the SFA are going to have to deal with if not just the decision on the pitch, but if you say he's had a chance to look at that and he's still got it wrong, then I think there's going to be we're in for some drama, we're in for some laughs. I think from an outsider's perspective, when it doesn't involve your team, you're going to have a decent laugh watching it, but the seed when it happens to you. At times it will be funny when it's other people, but it's scary. It's pretty scary. I'm a Scotland fan as well, obviously, so that's the only time I've experienced VAR from my team, and I've got a 100% record. Lyndon Dykes got that penalty. Shea Adams got the penalty against Austria. Lyndon Dykes scored it. We beat them in Vienna, so I'm fine with it. I love it. No problems at all.
And obviously, we will be back next Friday to look ahead to Scotland's big qualifier against Israel next Friday night. So looking forward to that. But let's get back to league action before VAR has another look at what we have to say about it. And it is the game in Perth this weekend. It's a Saturday 3 o'clock kickoff. St Johnston versus Dundee. If you're sticking this one on the coupon, St Johnston are going off at evens. The draw is 21-10 and Dundee are 10-3. St Johnston picking up their first win of the season a couple of weeks ago and then losing to Hibs last week. They are going into this game without Jamie McCart, who is suspended. Dundee still no win this season, although Lee Griffiths does look as though he will remain in the Dundee team for the weekend. They're still without Adam and I can't even pronounce this guy's name. Jababik, the other.
Go with that, mate.
We'll come back to that. But the question here ahead of this game, and it's one I think you'll have a good insight into, is on Dundee manager James McPake. Now, as it looks at the minute, he's probably the favourite to lose his job first in the league this season, just going on current form. But last season, Dundee came out of the blue and kind of the second half of the season blew everybody away to get into that promotion spot where they eventually came up after knocking down Kilmarnock. But what was it that James McPake did then to turn them around? And do you think it's possible that he can do it for a second year in a row?
It's a tough one. It was parts recruitment, I guess, last season that really served Dundee well. They brought in Lee Ashcroft, former Kilmarnock player, who had a decent start to life at Dunfermline Athletic and then kind of fell out of favour. So that switch, it was just kind of seen as one of those run-of-the-mill sideways moves that happens a fair bit in Scottish football, and especially in the lower leagues. But Lee Ashcroft really stepped up last season and formed quite a formidable partnership with Liam Fontaine. And I mean, you'll remember that Kyle Lafferty was in fantastic form going into those playoffs, and he was kind of the hope that Kilmarnock fans had that they'd be all right, they'd get out of it, we were still scoring goals. But those two did a fantastic job of just completely nullifying him in those games. So Lee Ashcroft was a big bonus. Charlie Adam getting into more fitness in the swing of things helped a lot as well. And the addition of Paul McMillan, who for me has actually had a pretty good start to the season despite Dundee's struggles as a team. He made the switch, the long journey from Tannadice to Dens. make a real boost to Dundee's season, and they kind of rode a wave for me, and I didn't enjoy this one either, but in the second round of the Scottish Cup, where they were 90 seconds away from defeat and be knocked out of the Cup by Lone League side Bolingbroke Rose. Of course, I was at that game. If they hadn't scored in those last 90 seconds, I genuinely believe that James McPake would have been sacked. And it was a massive goal by Jonathan Afolabi, Celtic loanee, of course, who's now at Ayr United. And I think that Rose went ahead again in injury time, but eventually Dundee won 3-2. And I think that was a real wake-up call to this Dundee side, that they were underperforming. They weren't just underperforming the league, and there's a massive sort of, in terms of the tiers and in terms of finances, there's a massive disparity between Rose and Dundee, and I'm sure they would have saw that as this sort of result, this sort of performance should never have happened against a team like that. It didn't surprise many folk who know the Rose. They always a team who can play above that level, and they always take it to teams who are in the divisions above them. We've seen that against Queen's Park this season as well. So I think that riding that wave, but when's that moment going to come? What's going to happen for Dundee that's really going to spark them into life? They need to make, and they can't afford to wait till January and bring in some more bodies again. They have their chance now, and the real concern is the fact that they're scoring virtually no goals. And I think that's quite surprising given the names you see there, of course.
Yeah, they've got plenty of firepower up front. You're talking Lee Griffiths, Jason Cummins, Paul McMillan.
Yeah, I mean, Killian Sheridan was one of those ones who you thought maybe, but he has been a goal scorer in Scotland before. So it is a little bit baffling. And it's been at times that Dundee just haven't converted their chances. James McPake spoke a few weeks ago and said that he feels like his criticism as a manager has sometimes been from the D fans that they haven't created enough chances. Well, now he's doing that. He just needs the strikers to convert them. I think that's partially true. I think they could do more in their attacking build-up as well to be a little bit more unpredictable. But I don't know. I still have a sneaky feeling that Dundee are going to be all right. I think that, while unglamorous, I think that squad's still pretty strong. I like players like Sean Byrne. I like players like Jordan Marshall. I think that if they were to get relegated, they'd be quickly snapped up by top-flight sides. So as much as Dundee were the pain in my backside for most of the last season, I still think there's a decent core there, and I think that James McPake has turned it around previously, so he can do so again, but I'm not sure what that spark's going to be. Maybe they need to get drawn against a lone league side in the Scottish Cup. I just hope it's not close.
We've got another 2 games to cover, so we'll quickly go to the predictions for this one. I'm going to put it out there that St Johnston, now that they've come off the European run, are going to start concentrating on getting the points in the league. I think it's a perfect chance for them against a struggling Dundee side, and that's why I fancy them to win 2-0.
Do you know what? Let's just back it. I'm feeling bold today, Colin. I'm going to say that Dundee are going to get their first win of the season on Saturday. And the Tayside derby, that's not a derby because Dundee have another derby, I'll say 1-0 Dundee.
1-0 Dundee. Well, I'm sure any bookies would love to take some of your bets on this weekend. We get 2 games to cover and we've only got 7 minutes, so let's try and fly through this before the Clyde boys came on to discuss their game against Airdrie tomorrow and look back at the 2-0 win over East Fife at the weekend. Let's start at the Spaghettiad, Livingston versus St Mirin, a game which is seeing 2 teams towards the bottom of the table clashing. 13-9 for Livingston at home, 2-1 for the draw, and 11-5 for St Mirin. I'll just go through some of the team news. It looks as if Livy are back to full strength this weekend, as are St Mirin. St Mirin now unbeaten in 4, including that win over Aberdeen at the weekend, where star man for me, definitely Sean, was Connor Ronan. He's scoring the 2 goals. He's also got an assist in 3 games. It's one of those players where you look at bringing guys up from the English leagues and you hope that they hit the ground running, and Ronan seems to be that guy.
Aye, and he took those goals really, really well. I mean, the second one in particular was an absolute smashing finish. And I think he's brought a really exciting dimension to that St Mirren midfield, especially when Jamie McGrath, I think it happens a fair bit with players that when they think they're going to get a move, it's not doubting the professionalism, but just when your head's in another space, it takes a while to get back into I'm still at this team. This is where I am. I need to sort of get back up to performances. I think you see it like Harry Kane at Spurs. I think there's a few examples of Jadon Sancho, Dortmund. I think there's a few examples of that. So for me, that Jimmy McGrath's time will come because he's a great player. I actually thought Alan Power was fantastic in that game against Aberdeen. I might have
no Kilmarnock bias there.
I know Celtic fans aren't the biggest fan of Alan Power, but that's fine. I think St Mirin were really impressive. Of course, there was their defensive lapses, as I said, but there's 2 set-piece goals they conceded, so cut out those mistakes, and there's plenty of height and ability in that St Mirren defence to do that. And I'm still not sure about Livingston. I know they got that win against Celtic, but I'm not seeing enough from them out with that to have any faith in them at all, really. So I'll be back in the buddies in this one. I don't know if you want me to give a prediction because we're struggling for time. But
we'll quickly cover this. I actually agree with you on Livingston. I think they're a pretty pure squad overall. Yeah. But their home form is going to be the thing that determines whether they stay up or not. And I'm not talking about picking up draws. They actually need to pick up the victories. And you look at it, if you look at their home performances this season, they've scored every single game. And that's going to be important. I was listening to Open Goal the other week, and what they said about the pitch at Livingston is when you play it up there, you know there's going to be no bounce. But the only team that's waiting on that is Livingston. So that's where they play into their strengths. And I think that's where you saw Shinnie getting ahead of Stephen Welsh to put the ball in the back of the net against Celtic a couple of weeks ago. And Livingston have got to play into that. So I think Livingston are going to score at the weekend. But I'm also going to back a St Mirren win. I'm going to go with a 2-1 victory for the Buddies.
They're both on 1-1 at the moment. I'm staying that way with a wee draw. And I'll say 0-0. Boring.
Oh, boring.
Nobody watch it.
Aye. Nobody go to the Spaghetti Ad on Saturday for that 3 o'clock kickoff. One game left to cover. We've got 3 minutes. Let's see how quick we can get through this. It is Dundee United versus Ross County. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. If you're sticking this one on the coupon, the bookies don't know which way this is going to go. It's 11-10 for Dundee United, 11-5 for the draw, and Ross County are 11-4, which surprises me because they still haven't picked up a victory this season. We mentioned earlier on Mr. and Mrs. Hark scoring on the same day, which is a fantastic achievement. But let's speak about Fuchs. Fuchs, for me, is one of the best signings of the season so far, and I think he's one that, again, you're speaking about the Hearts player. If Dundee United managed to hold on to him for the whole season, it could be the difference between them finishing in the top 6 or the bottom 6.
Yeah, I'm not trying to dig out, but Fuchs has been there for longer than this season. He was there at least a season before, maybe prior to that as well in the Championship, because I think he's been a decent performer at Dundee United for a while now. And I think that having a player like that in the midfield alongside Dylan Levitt, who looks to be a good signing from Manchester United on loan, I think that they have performed a team who have exceeded my expectations, much like Motherwell and County still, much like Livingston. I expect them to be bad. They're quite bad. I don't want them to be good. That's kind of all. I don't know how much is there.
Let's take it away from the manager, right? Because we've said this on multiple occasions, right? And everyone's got their reason behind it, right? The person I do have to praise in the Ross County team over the last couple of weeks is Regan Charles-Cook. I think he's been outstanding for them. He was very impressive at Celtic Park. He picked up a goal the other week as well. And he's one of those players that you love to see because he gets fans off their seat. He runs at players. He's got tricks abundance. And I think he is he's someone who Scottish football could be doing with more players like Regan Charles-Cook.
I think Regan Charles-Cook last season was one of those players who had flashes of potential, but no real end product. Didn't score many goals. Didn't really sort of buy much faith from the Ross County fans. I think that he would sort of dip in out of the squad, but like you said, he's been a little bit more consistent this season, and there's decent players in that team. Ross Callahan, of course, was a bright spark for Accies as they finished bottom last season. Jordan White can be a good Premiership striker, but I think he's pretty much the only out-and-out forward option, or the only one that name really stands out to me. And I think that's a massive concern because I don't know if he can do it consistently. So I'd be a little bit concerned about that. But for me, I just think that, especially at Tannadice as well, Dundee United are a better side, and that'll mean that the Terrors pick up the win on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-1 Dundee United victory.
Stole it from me. Do you know what? United going to thrash them. It's going to be 3-0 United. I don't know why I'm saying this.
3-0 United.
I believe in none of these, but I don't think I've predicted Ross County win this season. I don't plan on it.
So just before we wrap up here, we'll go through our predictions for the weekend. Both of us predict a victory for Celtic over Aberdeen. I predict the Rangers win. Sean predicts a draw for the Highbees. I predict Hearts to draw against Motherwell. You predict a Hearts victory. I predicted a St Johnston win. You've been bold and went for the D. In the fifth game, I went for a St Mirin victory over Livingston. You've went for a nothing each draw. And finally, we've both backed Dundee United to beat Ross County. Well, thank you to everyone who has joined us here on this Friday evening. There has been a lot to talk about, and that's the way we like it here at the State of Scottish Football. As we mentioned, we're sponsored by Ativ Watches, so do check that out as well. The Clyde boys are just about to come on, so do stick around for them. Myself and Sean will be back next Friday, but you will have a team here on Monday to digest what will be an exciting weekend of cinch. Take care.